Great. Welcome to our rates roundtable here on the 29th of September. I'm Dave Courvoisier. This is our third monthly voiceover rates and digital ad reform, aka Radar Roundtable. Thanks, JS. And Ganguzza and I are the hosts. We're very excited about these roundtable discussions. They've been well received. They've been garnering hundreds of views online. Now, we know we're not going to solve world hunger today, but we hope to get a little closer to examining the fast-paced changes surrounding rates and compensation challenges in the marketplace. And so by putting together an esteemed group like this, we're pretty sure that great information will be shared and we'll all be just a little more wise. So let me introduce our panelists today. We're going to start with Tim Keenan, who is the owner and operations director of Creative Media Recording. It's a full-service audio production company and voice talent. Thanks for being here, Tim. J.S. Gilbert this is what he wrote me. He said, say this. J.S. Gilbert fell into voice acting when he went to produce a radio spot over 2.5 decades ago. He's become so embarrassed about what voiceovers become that he currently tells people he works as a pole dancer. That's what he's going to say. And Nanci Washburn, she's the president, founder of Artist Management Agency, a full-service talent representative agency that has been a permanent fixture in San Diego for 45 years and in Orange County for nearly 25 years. The longest sole proprietor and established rep of on-camera and VO performers on the West Coast. Her representation of voiceover began in 1972, and I might add she's an amateur photojournalist, especially for some areas in Africa. Love to see your pictures, Nanci. Jay Britton is a UK-based voice actor, motion capture artist, specializing in voices for video games, animation, and corporate material. Melissa Exelberth is hopefully going to join us by phone. She's in transit trying to drive into the city of New York City, but she's been at it for a long time. She does it all in a lot of genres, and she's specifically very good about, there she is. Hi, Melissa. Right on cue. That's perfect.
Right.
She's in the car, and we asked her to come because she's so good about issues involving SAG and AFTRA. Graeme Spicer is here. He's the managing director responsible for much of the recent success at Edge Studio. He's from Toronto. He splits his time between there and New York City. Graeme comes from a long and very impressive corporate career, and he's a successful voice actor as well. And Brad Venable. Hi, Brad. Lives in Dallas, a successful video game voice artist, enjoys success in a lot of other VO genres as well. He's a World Voices board member where he is known as our tech guru. Thanks all for being here today, especially you, Melissa. I know you're working on it because you're traveling. We're going to try something new in this third session. We got about 25 or 30 WoVO members in attendance today, and want to thank them for being here. To ask questions, just click on the Q&A tab at the bottom. We'll try to get to them as best we can, and we hope this session will last no more than an hour to be respectful of everyone's time. All right, having said all that, let me introduce my lovely co-host, Ann Ganguzza, so she can get us started with the first question. Ann?
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here for our third time. I'm super excited. So I want to get right into it. And I'd like to direct the first question to Brad Venable. The hot topic of late, the hot topic has been fair rates and conditions for video game voice actors, as evidenced by the recent SAG-AFTRA strike authorization. So I have a couple of questions for you. The first, if you wouldn't mind giving us a breakdown of what are the specific performance requirements for a voice actor in a video game role, and then also union or non-union. What would be your thoughts on how a voice talent might be able to negotiate a fair rate, given the fact that it is a billion-dollar industry?
Very good questions. And I'm not sure that I'm actually going to be able to give a satisfying answer to many people on the rate question from a requirement standpoint. But to answer the first part, what you need is you need to have acting ability, straight up. You can't just walk off the street, which is one of the things that are being bandied about on the anti-performance matters side of the discussion on the strike authorization, potential for it and everything. And it just seems like that people don't really respect the fact that acting and performance does matter, and that's why the basis for some of the discussion is based on rewarding good performance with bonus payments. They're not calling it residuals, but that's one of the issues. The other issue is that you need to one of the other requirements rather is you need to be able to have a really great amount of stamina. And that relates to another issue on the rates discussion, is being able to go in and scream your head off, for lack of a better way of putting it. because that's what happens. And one of the reasons that they want to have some of that guarantee for like shorter sessions where they guarantee they're going to be doing 15 different ways to die as an additional voice as credit. I can go in on, most of the time when I go in on video game sessions, it's going to be on a Thursday or a Friday, because I know for a fact there's going to be a lot of screaming involved, because there's only so many ways that you can originally come up with ways to die or to take impact sounds or exertions. And that's one of the hot parts of the discussion, is limiting the amount of vocal stress based on if they're going to go in for a particular session. You can go in for a narrative session for a while, or keep it to a minimum on the exertion stuff. But there's been a huge influx in the multi-user online battle arena games, or MOBAs, where you play player versus player on teams, and there's going to be exertions, there's going to be calls out over a battlefield. They're going to be all those things that help stress the voice, and that's one of the things that they're trying to work on right now. As for some of the other stuff is, stunt performance, because their performance capture on facial and on body is also becoming a big thing, especially in the AAA voiceover titles, the Grand Theft Autos, the Witcher, the Metal Gears, just to keep it timely. Those are all parts. I mean, you can see the performance capture video of Benedict Cumberbatch in The Hobbit. As not a video game example, but also as an example of how performance capture helps the people who are creating.
Hey, Brad. Real quick question. When I first started querying you about this, you said that the real difference here is these are interactive gaming voices, as opposed to other gaming voices, which are already represented and are in the middle of a contract. So this is something new, right?
Yes. Well, new insofar as right now, interactive is working without a contract.
Right.
It expired on December 31st of last year. And that is why the timeliness of this particular agreement that they're trying to come to is the one that needs to have the focus. We're still working on commercial agreements and non-broadcast agreements. All of those things are still working. I think for the most part, I could be mistaken, and I think Melissa could maybe help me on that if I'm making an assumption there. But I believe most of those are all working within a contract. Negotiation is not necessarily for those because they're already in one. Whereas interactive, the last time there was a real talk about it was almost 10 years ago. And the organizational structure of how video games are made and what's more important now, voiceover has become such a huge important part of the gaming experience. And there's a huge difference between the way that you're a captive, interactive player versus just a simple viewer. And so there's got to be even more immersiveness. And those things are extremely important to those that work in the industry, of course, but also to a great many of those folks who play. I still play myself. I've got over 200 hours in the new Metal Gear game that just came out on September 1st. And yes, that's why
Well, JS, you were shaking your head there for a second. Is there something you disagree with?
Well, I'm actually part of the GVAC committee, which is part of GANG. The Game Audio Network Guild has been working tirelessly for years, both in terms of music composition being properly compensated within games. But the GVAC committee is the Gang Voice Actors Coalition. And there are a number of very prestigious individuals who are in this, top names in the gaming world. And we've been having a lot of back and forth regarding many of these things. But even still, I go back way back when Marie Salerno out of the San Francisco AFTRA office created the first interactive contracts. And I was very, very critical and said, these do not properly represent the special dynamics of the gaming industry. So right now, what most of the people who are producing games under contracts are saying is, why are you not creating scenarios that are going to be more inclusive? Because right now it seems like only maybe 4% of all the people that produce games out there are taking advantage of the union contract to hire voice talent. So as much as 96% of the games that are being produced. Now, they may not be the top titles, but I can tell you that in award circles, the last 3 or 4 years, very few of the games that were produced under a union contract actually garnered awards for voiceover. They went to non-union games.
Yep.
So it's an interesting kind of thing. A lot of the top voice talent that I know that are working in games and audio producers are also saying, we would love to think that the value of the voiceover is of prime importance in the game. But the truth is it isn't. It's really about gameplay, it's about the engines, and it's about the overall experience of the gamer. There are a lot of issues that are going on right now, but having done voices in between 300 and 400 games, I can say I'm not somebody who is actually looking towards wanting residuals. I would like the union to look at ways that they can be more inclusive, and that 4% number of union productions in gaming can go up to 10 or 15 or 20% or higher. That's what I would like to see happen. So
I'd like to just also ask JS, what are your thoughts about, video games that are being reissued, like older games that are being reissued? Should there, what are your thoughts about rates? Should there
it's
be
hard to say. I mean, when I started out, basically Atari and a lot of other these companies, I went in and my voice was put in libraries. So for years and years, my voice has been, you hear a guy go, there's a bogey on my back in like every game that has pilots in it. It could be me saying it and there's no compensation.
Right.
So, I think again, there's a difficulty that the unions are facing right now. And Einstein said it really well. Everything about us is changing except for the way that we think. And I think my sense is that there has to be a complete change in the thinking that the unions are going to have, or otherwise, when they go into the commercial contracts agreement with the 4As are going to pound them into the floor. They are going to make mincemeat out of the unions. People think SAG and AFTRA joined to make them stronger. They joined because they were really having trouble. And don't get me wrong. I love the unions. I love what they stand for. But I do not like I am not in like-mindedness with the people in charge of the unions today. And if you love something, feel free to criticize it and make it stronger. I'm not trying to do away with them or knock them down by any stretch of the imagination. I think they've got major, major problems. If you're not familiar with the ATA, that is actually the organization that most talent agencies belong to today, and most talent agents do not have an agreement with the unions.
Nanci, where do you stand on that? Are you a member of the ATA, and how often do you book video game talent?
The answer is no, I'm not, and I dropped my franchise exactly a year ago after 47 years.
Why?
Of being franchised. I was disgusted.
With?
I have had so many of my performers abused by their own union, and not having them go to battle, and understanding that the majority of the performers that I have dealt with through my many years of representation are scale performers. They're not over scale. And what I guess the tipping block was when I had a performer who was on camera for SeaWorld. It was a union job. It was pieces were taken and used into a new piece of footage and put in the airport.
Oh.
And I reported it to them. And to make a long story short, nothing has ever happened with it. And as much as I have jumped up, down, like Rumpelstiltskin, I got nowhere. And then I was told I was arrogant, and that was it. That just took the top right off.
Wow.
I said, I don't need this, and I don't need my performers.
So do you still represent union talent in any way?
You bet.
Okay.
You bet. Absolutely. I love the union. I always have loved the union, and I agree with the gentleman who just spoke a few minutes ago. I don't like the current management. They don't have a clue as to what they're doing. They're greedy. It's about who makes money for them for their salaries and their big building, not about the performer. They are not, as far as the majority of the performers are scale performers.
Yeah.
2% are the big kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's all they really care about is the big kids.
I'd like to get Jay involved in the conversation, as he's a newer talent in the arena of video games. What are your thoughts on fair rate?
It's interesting because obviously, as you say, I mean, I'm UK based. Now probably in the last 18 months or so, I've done 10 or 15 video game titles, from indie dev up to someone working on at the moment, which would be classed as AAA. It's very interesting over here because, of course, we don't particularly have a union at all. There is no union, non-union work over here. It's very much a free market, which in some ways you might think gives us less power in terms of negotiating, but with everyone being their own free enterprise, you're actually quite free to negotiate with the games producers on your own terms. Usually you'll be the audition through an agent who will handle that for you, but there's so much avenue now for going direct to game devs, which is something I do an awful lot, is just reach out to game devs. And when you can get on that page with games development companies, especially what we're talking about with SAG-AFTRA is, and what is blowing up publicly, is the very entrenched, huge AAA games producers. It's that everyone's interested in the top tier talent, and the big games is what gets talked about. But obviously, games is a $1 billion worldwide industry with so much massive scope. And over here, especially, and I work a lot with Eastern European games developers, and actually not having a fixed contract that states rates and scales and responsibilities is actually kind of a plus, because you can negotiate that direct with the games developers. You can set your own rate. You can work on back-end deals yourself. I mean, I've worked on games where I've decided that it's got a lot of promise, it's got a great script, the game looks nice. I'll do it for $0 up front, but I want 1%, 2%, 3% off of the back. And you can negotiate those kinds of deals, and they're very open to it. So the market works very, very differently over here. In terms of where I stand on SAG-AFTRA, I'm not a big union fan, I'll admit that. Well, I think I agree with the two people that have already spoken in terms of I agree with the idea of a union, but in terms of how they conduct themselves, and what they try to achieve with what they've got, I don't necessarily agree with. And again, I think now reading around, I mean, I'm a huge gamer. I'm a massive, massive gamer. Much like yourself, Brad. I don't have 200 hours on the new Metal Gear Solid because I just don't have the time. I really, really wish I did. But when I read through what they're asking, I think, as I think it was JS who said, I think it just feels like nobody is on the same page. Nobody is up to speed with what the gaming industry is doing at the moment and where it's going to go over the next 5 to 10 years. It feels like they're negotiating old school, and they're negotiating under the belief that they have more power than perhaps they do. They're looking at 4% of work actually going to union. That's a massive amount of work that's going to non-union talent, to non-union work. So for SAG-AFTRA to go to bat like they represent a massive amount of video game work that takes place is perhaps a bit naive. I might offer. And as much as I'm a voice actor specifically for games, I would struggle to agree that we are really the seller behind a game. But the flip side is, if a games company then wants to shout out, as Brad will surely know, like they did with Metal Gear Solid, and they go, hey, we replaced David Hayter with Kiefer Sutherland, well, now you are selling off the back of a voice. So similarly, the games companies can't have their cake and eat it. I'm a reasonable man, essentially. I think, yes, there needs to be change, and especially from a motion capture perspective, because obviously I do that as well. And I think something that is absolutely right is Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the motion capture aspect because I've seen some of your posts, so I know that you're involved in that. What are special considerations for the
Yeah, I mean,
motion capture aspect of it?
I think absolutely SAG-AFTRA are right in and looking at from a stunt perspective. I mean, one of the things that, and this is a thing as well, I think where it does need to be taken. I think SAG-AFTRA are right in terms of looking at voice and motion together. One of the reasons I trained in motion capture was because for anyone who's got their eye on the ball, it's very obvious that media forms are converging. Give it long enough, there will be no voice and motion capture. It's all going to be motion capture. Eventually. It just will. That's simply the way it's going to go. With the technology of full body scanning, face scanning, it's the way it's going to go.
They did that with The Last of Us.
Absolutely, yeah.
Videos online, if anyone wants to look, just search for The Last of Us motion capture.
I found really, really good documentary if you're into gaming performance. But yeah, I mean, one of the first things I was taught when I trained in motion capture is if you're booked for a voice job and basic motion capture and you turn up and they're asking you to jump off a bridge, there is a responsibility on the performer. And I'm going to say, I'm kind of going to play devil's advocate here. If you turn up, if you're booked for voice work and basic motion capture and you turn up and they go, right, we want you to fly across the zip wire and jump off at the end, and you say yes and get hurt, I'm not saying it's all on the performer, but you have to be confident in standing up for your own rights and go, well, that's not what I was booked for. It's not what you're paying me for, and it's not safe to do that. And nobody, even if you're the new guy in the business, should be afraid of stating quite clearly, that's not what you've booked me for. I'm not doing it. And that's one of the first things you get taught. And any decent motion capture studio will back you. They're not going to get you doing stunt stuff that they're not covered for. It's certainly over here. I mean, I don't know any Wild West motion capture studios that are doing things on the sly, but they don't want the responsibility either.
Jay, thank you for your perspective from the UK.
Let me just
I wanted to try
thing. Can I interject one thing?
Yes, Nancy.
I am in total and complete agreement. What happens is that if with the studios, if they can get away with it, they will try. The only way that's going to stop is if the performers have a stiff backbone and say, I will do it if you pay me properly.
Let's continue this thread about union protections or not with Graeme. Graeme, you sit in a New York City studio. You're quite well versed on the issues of rates and union involvement. Do you wish the union would stand up for more voice actors just outside of gaming or even TV, radio, professional commercials? It seems to me they kind of pick and choose the battles they want to fight.
I find the whole situation with SAG-AFTRA frustrating in that, first of all, I really feel that voice actors are second-class citizens right off the start when it comes to SAG-AFTRA, is that we're really the poor cousins to the on-screen people. So we don't get a lot of attention to begin with. And then the voice acting, the voice acting community that does get paid attention to by the union is a very tight group that's almost entirely situated in either New York or Los Angeles. So if you are a voice actor in Chicago, it's pretty tough to really get any protections from the union other than, I guess you can probably hold, union rates. But even then, as Nanci explained, is that, you can bring absolutely blatant transgressions to their attention, and they seem to be fairly subjective with regards to which of those that they're going to pursue and which ones are, we'll let that one slide. That's just not worth our time in order to pursue that one. And, unfortunately, San Diego's not Los Angeles, and therefore, they unfortunately chose not to pursue the one that Nanci brought forward, which to me seems, fairly clear cut. Like, this isn't subtle and this isn't, subjective, like, oh, I don't know, I could see either way. I mean, that one's pretty blatant. So,
well, they also deunionized us. They allowed Clear Channel to come in here to the radio stations, break the contracts. Every station in this town now is non-union. They fired everybody and brought in people for $7 an hour. It's pathetic. The union totally, both SAG and AFTRA deserted a very strong union town and said, no, we're not going to be there anymore. You're now part of Los Angeles.
Yeah, it's really hard if outside of
Very
Los
sad.
Angeles and New York to get much attention from them.
Yep.
Totally.
We at Edge Studio, we like to think that we're involved in bringing up the next generation of voice actors. There are many voice actors that get their starts with us. And I've had, a number of conversations with SAG-AFTRA in New York. I haven't spoken to SAG-AFTRA in Los Angeles, but I've spoken to SAG Foundation in Los Angeles several times. And we want, Edge believes in what the union stands for. We think that anything that is going to lead to a better career for voice actors, that's going to ensure that they get paid appropriately, that's going to ensure that they have employment opportunities. We're all on the same page here. What's frustrating is that for whatever reason, SAG-AFTRA seems to have little interest in the upcoming group of voice actors. I don't know, the jaded side of me thinks that, well, SAG-AFTRA is run by its membership. There's a bunch of very senior, voice actors in Los Angeles and New York. They're not that keen on bringing on a whole lot of new competition, and therefore aren't actively promoting bringing new voice actors into the union. And of course now, 25 years ago, there was no such thing as a non-union voice actor making $150,000 a year. That didn't exist, right?
Yep.
Now,
Absolutely.
there are hundreds, probably thousands of successful non-union voice actors who really don't have the option they don't have the option of joining SAG-AFTRA, because the minute that they do, they have to completely, turn their back on the clients that have, put food on their table and put their kids through college for the past 15 years.
Yep.
So there's no ability really for actors who have had success in the non-union world, which almost everybody starts in now. You don't jump from waiting tables into becoming a SAG-AFTRA actor and doing national, radio spots for, a big insurance company. It doesn't happen like that anymore.
Yeah.
So I find the whole
They've also stopped organizing.
I find the whole SAG-AFTRA thing incredibly frustrating. We want to promote. We think that actors should aspire to union membership. I want to compete against the best actors in the world. I want to compete on the best projects in the world, and I want to get paid really well. I hear about these, $150,000 paydays, and I want those jobs too. And I try and convince our students that they should too. But man, it's becoming a harder and harder sell to talk about SAG-AFTRA in these, this is what we all should aspire to, when every time I've tried to reach out to SAG-AFTRA, I want them to, we have a class in our new upcoming curriculum about SAG-AFTRA and union versus non-union work. And I've invited SAG-AFTRA to participate in developing the curriculum for that class.
Right.
Or, heck, they can come in and they can deliver the class. I would love that.
We've tried,
and we've invited,
tried time and again to get SAG-AFTRA representative here on our panel, and we just keep getting, thanks.
Well,
thanks.
Thank you.
And the other big example is, the union thinks that online casting sites are the devil, and that they are killing union work.
Yeah, but what are they doing about it?
Well, I don't, but the thing is, the online casting sites, both of them, and I know this because I have conversations with the people at the online casting sites, with the executive management teams there. They've reached out to SAG-AFTRA and have continually over a period of time to try and engage them, and SAG-AFTRA won't even return the calls.
Really? Wow.
Graeme, I have almost 100 clients that I have worked for in my history who were producing under union contracts pop up in the last 3 or 4 years with non-union projects. And a lot of them just seem to be at a point where they say, we don't need to spend $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 for a guy to work for an hour and have a spot run for 6 months to a year, when we can just offer it at $500 for a session fee and $1,000 buyout if they keep working. And this seems to be what's happening. And rather than trying to go to these people who produced under union contracts and say, how can we work with you? Because I have been in management. I come from an advertising background, and I have friends in the 4As. They have tried to shut them down. They've tried to picket them. They've tried to do all kinds of things that have just driven our business in the United States to Canada, to Australia, to New Zealand, to elsewhere. My thought is inclusivity. Don't you want to do what's going to be in the best interests of everybody after it's all said and done?
Yeah.
That's the actors, that's the people who are producing the various products and projects, and to look at inclusivity. And they seem to be intent on puffing out chests that, I'm sorry, are no longer, six-pack abs, but they're not chests that should be pumped out anymore. And saying, look at all the unions that have dropped by the wayside. Just dropped by the wayside.
Well, certainly I don't want this to turn into a big bashing session on SAG-AFTRA. I guess I don't think that if this conversation's about rates and protecting our rates, I don't know that we're going to be able to look to SAG-AFTRA to provide leadership there. I think it's going to be up to us in World Voices more so, and other organizations of voice actors don't look to SAG-AFTRA to help us very much.
I'd like to bring the conversation to Tim Keenan there, who has been in audio production, for over 30 years at his studio, and ask him how he has seen the industry change and what it's meaning for him, and what about fair rates? How are you helping to negotiate fair rates for the people that you bring into your studio?
Unfortunately, I'm not involved in this whole union crunch, which is, we're south of LA, and we're a non-union production company, and but I'm a recording studio, and we do everything. So we've done union projects with where the talent, the producer comes in, they've hired their own talent through an agent, and they bring in the contracts, and we see it happen, and it goes on. But 95% of the stuff we're involved in is non-broadcast corporate, non-union stuff. So I in many cases, I'm an intermediary. The thing that I have seen is I work with a lot of production companies, and I have seen the production business, the production companies, their budgets have been slashed since the 2008 recession. I mean, 15 years ago, they were working on $50,000 video projects, and these days they're lucky to get a third of that or a fourth of that. And so in the olden days, they had lots of money for talent, they had lots of money for composers to do music, they had lots of money for 3D animators, and lots of money for special effects and that kind of thing. And now it's like, well, how can we do a video without the special effects, and can we use stock music? We've got lots of stock music that we're a stock music composing facility, and then unfortunately it gets down to where can we find talent for less, and that's, I think, been the proliferation of the pay-to-play sites, and there is a tremendous growth in talent, I would say, in the last 10 years. The internet's made it available for you to find talent everywhere, and not just with pay-to-play sites, but just with everybody doing their own marketing and their own branding and social media, Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and all that. So I think that when there is a glut of the market, then that affects pricing. There's no question.
Yeah. Melissa, can you hear us, Melissa?
The noise or
We can't hear you very well. Can you say a little something? You haven't caught all the conversation, but we so respect you and your knowledge of the workings of SAG-AFTRA. We're wondering what you think about the current climate for rates or not, and SAG-AFTRA.
Rates as regard to what?
Well, there's been a little bit of discouragement among those who are not in New York or LA that the union doesn't necessarily represent their concerns, or people who are in e-learning or other avenues of getting work in voice acting that wasn't available before, and the union seems to be non-present, or there's little incentive for anybody to join the union anymore. What do you think?
That seems to be the perception. I mean, in all honesty, there's a plethora of work out there that never existed before. Unfortunately, in my view, the union is still the union is doing patchwork over contracts that were created in the industrial age. We've gone beyond that. There's a ton of work out there that doesn't really fall under union jurisdiction just by nature of the fact that it didn't exist 10 years ago. So, a lot of some of that work, the union may not be interested in. I don't know. The union is interested in everything, but some things are more interesting than others.
Well, let me ask you this: since they merged, have you seen a real difference in the way they're treating their members, or even trying to recruit non-members?
Well, I have. Now, I come from Legacy AFTRA. Okay, so I've always been an AFTRA member. I actually was a must join at SAG right before the merger, so I lucked out as far as that went. But I have seen a difference, and it seems that there's much greater focus on film, television, and celebrity video.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed. I'm sorry, go on.
I mean, that's my perception, and I'm in New York. So, this is coming from somebody who does strictly VO, who doesn't do on camera. And I'm in New York. Most of my work is I convert. I find non-union work, pays enough, and I convert it to union work. So, I mean, even being in New York, I find that there's not much of a focus on VO unless it's broadcast commercial campaigns, celebrity VO. E-learning, I don't even know if anybody knows what that is.
Okay.
I have a comment I want to bring in some of our guests that are in the chat room. Yeah, and so there is a comment about how the union doesn't seem to have recognized that the internet exists yet, and that they are way behind the times and perhaps sitting on their laurels. Anybody like to comment on that?
They're beginning to realize that it exists, but there's still it's a stretch. What a lot of people don't seem to understand, people, union board members, maybe committee members, not speaking about anybody, or group in particular, but they don't seem to understand the way we work. I had a conversation with a committee not long ago, and it appeared to come as a surprise to them when I explained one part of the corporate contract, which was how IVR works, for instance, because it didn't seem that they had a really big understanding as to how this works, how we find the work, how we convert the work. And when the topic came up about actually recording, there seemed to be surprise that we record in our own studios. So, they're coming to terms with the fact that, frankly, they dropped the ball when it comes to voiceover. Voiceover is global. Voiceover can be done globally from your own studio, which all of us know. And they're finally beginning to realize that they don't know the paradigm. They don't know how this works. And that's something that's going to have to be tackled.
Well,
They've always been that way. It took them forever to develop a web page. It took them forever to get online. It took them forever to get their contracts online. You were forever having to call and ask for the update on rates and the update on this because they weren't online.
It may be a scenario of too much, too late, too little. It's possible. Yeah. They did start off, their reason for coming into being was not to support an independent contractor. It was really to support the day workers that were being dealt with poorly by the studios. You were owned by a studio back then.
Yeah.
And to a large extent, they are still really very much involved with things like television and films, and that's where they're making a lot of their money. Although right now, because of the broad nets and the crowdsourcing for things like commercials and things like that, they are kind of having a heyday with individuals coming in, paying huge amounts to join the union and then disappearing, because that is kind of representative of almost pure profit for the unions. They have recently created an online tool that allows for people to go in and get a fairly good idea of how much it will cost them on a production to hire individuals, including health, pension, and welfare. They do now allow for us to pay our dues online. So there are ways they're trying to play catch up. Will they ever be any organization out there that's doing bleeding edge or cutting edge, or that you're going to marvel at for their 21st century mentality? I don't think so. But there are those of us who are saying, we don't want 21st century thinking, just get in the 20th century and we'd be happy with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was one of my fears, as I'm going to be moving to Los Angeles here in the next 9 months or so. And it's going to be a situation where I'm eligible to join, and I haven't, because I haven't been forced to, because I would have to give up such a glut of the work that I do, or at least from the standpoint of, converting it, it would be greatly difficult for me to do some of that, because I'm not the only talent on certain, live shot commercials and stuff like that. So what JS has said is exactly what I'm hoping for, is that there is a way that they're reaching out to really represent me as a talent. And that's why I think I've been behind this, even as what I call, I'm not a non-member or a non-union talent. I'm a pre-union talent, the way I describe myself. And that's the way I think they should take at least a viewpoint as to, they should want everybody in the union. That way they can really, negotiate en masse for everyone.
Yep. Jay, you're thinking about moving to LA from Britton. Have you looked into this question about union representation? Would you join? Is this a daunting prospect for you?
No, it's a very well, everything's daunting about moving to a different country, but I think, to be honest, I think the union non-union question is a no-brainer. It's non-union. It's there is no question, for the reason Brad has just said, really, in that you would have to give up such a massive percentage of your income for very little gains. I mean, as it was said earlier, with union being 4% of video game production, you're asking someone to give up 96% of their opportunities to work. And I think, to be honest, the way in which SAG-AFTRA is going to bat with the video game issue at the moment is, again, just a reflection of how they don't appreciate what the voiceover industry is like now. It's been said there are so many ways to get work now from so many different avenues that the union work represents a tiny, tiny slice of the pie. There is no way I could move to LA and go, right, well, I'll do just union work now. It just simply wouldn't be feasible, which is why you then look to, well, why isn't the union looking at, as Brad says, the non-union members, the non-union work, and seeing what it could convert there, or at least releasing the shackles of going, well, you can become in the union, but then you can't touch anything else with a barge pole. Now, being in the UK, it's, I'm not as up to speed. I know you have there's things called FICOR, where you can kind of do non-union work and union work as well. But I guess on this side of the pond, and in Europe, and I know we got voiceover talent in Spain, and it's almost a weird concept. I mean, we understand SAG-AFTRA and we understand the union and its place, because we have obviously unions for other industries over this side of the pond, but from a voiceover perspective, we kind of don't get it. It just seems like an anchor that is holding back perhaps the American market from growing into something better, when it's still trying to fight for its own ends, and with a model that doesn't even have relevance in the voiceover industry in 2015.
Can I just echo some of those comments? You know, I want to play a little bit of what Jay said, because there's been a lot of union and non-union, people who are union doing a lot of non-union work over the years, because they know what the reality is. The reality is everybody wants to work. And if there's non-union work in the corporate world or the e-learning world where their voice isn't going to necessarily be seen by the general public, they're taking it. People are taking it. And that's just the way that it's been for 3 decades.
I'd like to bring the conversation back to maybe a more generalized discussion about fair rates, not just union, non-union, but what can we do as a collective to help our members, or not even members, just people in the voiceover community, to establish a fair rate or demand a fair rate, whether you're union or non-union? What guidelines do you guys have?
I'm going to be. I'd like to jump in on that because I wouldn't say I have a weird view. I have perhaps a slightly different view to most, in that I think one of the things we need to stop doing, and I don't see everyone doing this. I mean, you see rates discussed everywhere, and a lot of Facebook groups. What I think part of what we need to stop doing is, as ourselves, we need to understand and appreciate that the industry has changed, and that demanding. I'm trying to think of the right analogy here, but demanding £500 for a corporate video for client A is the same as demanding £500 from a corporate video for client B, because that's what a fair rate is for 3 minutes of corporate. So I think one thing we have to get over is almost my voice is worth £500 for that, I don't care who you are attitude of that's what a fair rate is. I think what we need to appreciate is how the economics of the industry has changed with the advent of the internet. So much work out there, so much talent out there. I think what's key isn't trying to get the same rate for everything. It's getting a fair rate for what the job is. And the key thing about any industry that moves to the internet, it happened with stock photography is the analogy I always use. When suddenly people could get their photos for $20 off a stock photography website.
Yep.
What happens to the photographers? Well, if you're smart about it, what I actually run is I run a dual rate system. I have 2 separate set of rates, and for little Bob's DIY store around the corner, if he wants a 30-second corporate video for his website that he's building at home with his son who's learning coding at school, I'm not going to charge him the same price as I would charge Amazon for a 5-minute for a 30-second corporate video. So I think part of that is appreciating that yes, everything's gone to the internet, everything's gone to pay to play, and you could either be scared by that and try and steadfastly stick to a rate card that perhaps doesn't have its place anymore, or you can run a business model that actually allows you to cater to more of the clients that are out there while still getting yourself a fair rate. I mean, that's kind of where I sit on it.
Well,
I just see a lot of people trying to demand the same rate for everything.
And it comes down to your own understanding of your self-worth, and as Nanci said, having a spine.
Yep.
Graeme, what would you
chime
say?
in as a I have 2 steadfast rules. Number 1, don't sell your soul. Respect what you do as a performer. Respect the money that you have spent to build your studio, that you have spent to educate yourself as far as your craft is concerned. And I think that's part of what a lot has been lost, is that there's a tremendous, with clients, there's a tremendous disrespect for the craft. They just think that John and Joe go in front of a camera or go in front of a microphone and spit out words. And I agree with what he just said, it depends on the project. Every project is different. Every budget is going to be different. And you need to have that open, which is what I do. I have an open conversation with my producer to say, okay, you obviously have set a budget. Tell me what your budget is. And if I can live with it, then that's fine. But if not, then for the next go around, you need to call me and say, what's it going to cost me? So that you budget properly. But the key thing is, don't sell your soul as a performer. Respect your skill.
So is it time for JS to say some of the unpopular things that he's known for?
Sure, JS.
Well, you can go ahead and say it, JS, or I'm going to.
Well, here's the thing. I had a number of conversations years ago with a Buddhist monk, And one of the things he said to me that stuck was, there is nothing inherently spiritual about poverty.
Right.
To that end, I would say, if you are putting food on your table, I have a great deal of respect for you. If you are a voice talent who is living in your mother's basement at the age of 45 years old, trying to hold through to getting high rates, maybe there's an issue or problem. So the internet happened to come about at a great time to greet the 2 decades or so of the gospel of prosperity that was being preached, which is telling people you can't have jobs, you have to go out and grab the brass ring and all that. And then technology, of course, making it very difficult for people to get jobs. So the mentality is, gee, I can't get a job flipping burgers at McDonald's. Why don't I become a voice talent? So the problem is twofold. It isn't just that we now have a situation where the hirers of talent, and yes, a lot of them are millennials. My experience has been, I am a millennial. Value me highly, pay me millions of dollars. Oh, and I'm going to go find people I need on Fiverr.com. That's another story, another panel. We can do that elsewhere. But we're also seeing individuals out there who are entering all kinds of creative pursuits, whether it's graphic design, whether it's web design, whether it's I'm a life coach. Gee, a life coach, and you can't get off your parents' couch, but all this kind of stuff. And of course, the internet is great for presenting not the truth, but impressions. So we can tell the truth about voice acting in the game industry. I've done about as many games as anybody else has, and I've made more money off of 2 good commercials than I have off of all the games that I've done. So when I see somebody holding a workshop that says how to make a living doing games, I cringe, because you can do 20 games in a year, and guess what? If you're lucky, that's maybe 20 grand, 30 grand tops. So this is a big problem that we have, because there are perceptions that are going on. Be a business.
Yeah.
Voiceover is about being a business. What the heck are your client acquisition costs? What is your square footage? How much are you paying for support services? What is your insurance? Are you losing $1 on every sale, hoping to make it up in volume? And this is the thing. Be smart, be businesslike. If you're electing to make yourself the head of your own business and you can't get a job out there, then maybe you need to develop other skills or find people to trust to have around you. And this is what's leading to the problem. It's twofold. People are not going to discount you or marginalize you unless there are enough people in the marketplace that are willing to allow for themselves to be discounted and marginalized. And I've heard from people constantly for the last 10 years, oh, they'll disappear, they'll go away. Guess what? They're not. They're just clogging up the waters. And this is a real issue that we have right now. So I say, look at your own business. If it does not cost as much money in client acquisitions for me to get a client that hires me to do 500 jobs in a year as it does to hire 500 clients or have 500 clients hire me each to do 1. How much does that worth as a discount in terms of pricing or whatever? You have to have a good understanding of how your business runs.
I think that's where WoVO can, I think that's where WoVO can step up, is because so many people who get into voiceover don't come from the freelance world. They don't know what a freelance photographer is or a freelance actor is, and that it is a business, that there is an overhead, there is an expense involved in having a business. They come from a job where they've earned a salary, and they go over to voiceover and they go, wow, I could make bottom line, by the time I'm done, I'll have earned $20 an hour. Well, that's more than I was making in my job, or $25 an hour. It's more than I was making in my job. And they think that's a step up. They don't understand that the fee that they get, which isn't the fees from 10 or 15 years ago. But it's a higher fee, has to cover all of your expenses and overhead as well, that it is a business. So when you talk about the business things, we've talked about rate cards. I think in the last episode, Sean Caldwell did a survey that had some great templates of rate cards, but those differ all around the country. Jay had a great experience that, if you're in a little small market, you're going to charge a mom and pop something less than if you are hired off the internet by a big company that does a lot of e-learning, that knows what things cost.
We're getting close to the top of the hour, and I want to. We just don't have time to get everybody's comments. Graeme, I think you had something maybe unpopular you wanted to say.
Yes, Graeme, please.
I only buy into what JS just said to a point, or the kind of the tenor of the panel to a point, is that Yeah, I think there's a lot more voice actors now than there was 20 years ago. But I also think that there is a exponentially larger number of jobs than there was 20 years ago. The same technology that has allowed for there to be so many more voice actors have also allowed for there to be so much more content that's required. So I don't buy this argument that there's a glut of voice actors. I don't. I don't buy this argument that rates are being driven down. And I know that that's not going to be very popular, but in social media and amongst ourselves, we like to talk about, oh my God, rates are being driven into the ground by these bastards on the pay-to-plays. And I don't buy it because I don't see it. I think that, there are still jobs, many jobs on the online casting sites which are going for scale or much more than scale. I think there's a lot of crap there too, but I think there's always been a lot of low-paying jobs. It's just that 25 years ago, you used to have the afternoon drive guy come in 2 hours early and do them for $20 a pop or nothing, right? There's always been a low end of the business, always. That hasn't changed. I don't care about the people on Fiverr.
Melissa, we'll give you the last word.
Yeah, you speak about that and how there's, there are low-paying jobs, there are high-paying jobs, but what about the predators that insert themselves in between talent and the clients and lift a huge percentage of the talent budget from the talent? They keep the talent away from the client. Very often, the talent doesn't even know who they're recording for.
Sounds like a casting director to me.
Their terms and conditions mandate an absolute buyout to themselves. In the fine print, and talent can record, say, a corporate video and then have the tagline of that video lifted for a national spot, or who knows, this is just conjecture. But if you look in the fine print, you'll see that when you do a job, all rights are turned over to particular pay-to-play site, and you find jobs, and it's been my experience where I have had auditions from local production houses, and the rates that they have sent me for a particular job are easily 10 times more than when I see that job come up on the So that needs to be addressed. The predator.
I think that we can all agree that there are specific business practices of both of the current online casting sites that are, I don't know, reprehensible. I can't think of a nicer word to say. But the idea behind online casting is not going to go away.
That's true.
Now, whether one or both of the existing online casting sites becomes the MySpace of online casting and Facebook comes up and kicks their butts, that may be the case. And if dishonest business practices continue, then I hope that someone does. Mm-hmm. But let's not cloud the specifics of our anger around this particular online casting site, which is absolutely valid. I'm not taking anything away from that. But let's not allow our anger around the specifics of this one company's business practices cloud our judgment around online casting, using online platforms in general to help us sell what it is that we sell.
Okay.
There are dishonest everybody in terms of acting, from the actor who misrepresents themselves all the way up to people who want to teach this and don't know what they're doing. And so to really vilify any particular group across the board for the actions of one, I think is really irresponsible, completely irresponsible. And if you have an issue with one particular individual or somebody out there that is doing something that is problematic, then I think your issue is specifically with them, and really you owe it to make sure that does not wash off or create issues for other people that may be out there that are doing the best jobs they can, trying to represent themselves ethically and do it in a quality way.
And if I can just say that we're all representative. I mean, we do have discussions, and we're all responsible for the image of the industry. And I think that we all need to really take a close look at how we, project our images onto that industry.
Guys, it's been an hour, and man, I'd love to continue. Let's have you all back sometime.
Yeah.
I want to I want to thank I really try to keep this to an hour so it can be manageable for people not only involved in it, but who are watching it later. So Melissa Exelberth, thank you for your great effort to be part of this. Nanci Washburn, thank you. J.S. Gilbert, Graeme, Jay, Brad, Tim, Anne, thank you. All of you so much for contributing to this conversation today.
And the wonderful Dave Courvoisier.
Yeah, well, he's just a hack.
Absolutely.
I'm going to
Thanks,
stop this
everybody.
recording now. Thank you all for being here.